track list.
Can we preface this by saying, Tim and I agree that Meatloaf kind of looks like if you crossed Beethoven with Chris Farley.
That's actually a really good, I feel like, description of Meatloaf. You know, you have the musical power of Beethoven and thus the inherent like this just knowing exactly like what music to make, combined with the artistry and the acting and the playfulness and the joyfulness of Chris Farley. So yeah, I think that's a good way to start off with Meatloaf here. Yeah, this album's Bad Out of Hell, Meatloaf. Meatloaf is a pretty interesting dude. He was like a Broadway actor. He was in like Rocky Horror Show. He was a regular actor in played Bob in Fight Club. That was a fun fact I learned.
He had bitch tits.
Yeah, bitch tits. Robert Paulson. So, you know, a pretty cool guy, pretty accomplished. It makes a lot of sense that he has like that he does musicals and Broadway and that kind of thing. This album is very like theatrical, I feel like is like a really good way to put it. Very dramatic. I think it actually is a rock opera. I read that somewhere. I haven't like looked at the lyrics for any of these songs, but so you know, it is cohesive and kind of feels like you're listening to a musical here. And it rocks. I mean, just starting with the track list here, I think like Bad Out of Hell is just a great song. It is so awesome. Took the words right out of my mouth, has like that like random like intro of like the wolf on a hot summer night. Yeah, so it's just a really cool album. It's a lot of fun album to like drive to, I would say, to walk around to, but some slower songs too, you know, some what is it, tearjerkers. They pull at your heartstrings. But yeah, it's a good album. I like it. Bad Out of Hell. I learned too that it's the first out of a trilogy, so there are 2 other Bad Out of Hells follow-ups. So next time we're gonna have to do Bad Out of Hell too. Return to Hell.
Nice. I haven't. Yeah. So I've always heard like Meatloaf, but I've never actually like listened to the whole album or any of the albums that matter like straight through. And I was having a great time listening to it. I feel like I kind of didn't realize how many of the ballads there are that he does, because you always hear the Bad Out of Hell, and then yeah, the ballads are really good too, and then and it gives a different feel throughout the album, like it spices it up, which is really nice, and the theatricalness of it is really elevates the album, I think. I feel like I've just heard Bad Out of Hell so many times that I just kind of think of Meatloaf just as that. And it was nice to hear that it's a lot more going on. It reminded me a lot of Boston, like the first album, Boston, in terms of the rock side, just the way the guitars sound. And then like also kind of like it mixed in like kind of like Elton John-esque like theatricalness and glam to it. But yeah, I love to take the words right out of my mouth. I think that song is awesome. And yeah, I think it was great to listen to the whole thing finally.
This was probably the most fun I've had listening to an album in a long time. And I'm surprised that I haven't ever listened to this album before, because I mean, it's Meatloaf's first album, and it goes on to being one of the best selling albums of all time. And I feel like everybody's listened to this album before, but I've never listened to them front and back, and it goes places. It absolutely does. You know, it starts out really powerful, really fun, really strong, and then it gets somber by the end. But you kind of, you really ride it all the way through, because Meatloaf just carries you. Like, he's so joyful and so like sincere that you can't help but just enjoy every minute of the album.
I feel like you guys touched on most of it, you know, with just sort of the elements of, you know, how theatrical this is, and, you know, and you know, touching on, you know, how there are a lot of just sort of those classic rock, you know, classic rock sounds going on here. You're like, yeah, I definitely hear Boston. I was thinking a little bit of Queen as well, honestly, just because of, you know, again, just sort of how theatrical and fun and uplifting some of the songs were. But what was kind of interesting is before I even knew that he had done, what did you say, Broadway, or was he just like, um,
Yeah, I think it was that this was after this album came out, but he was a Broadway actor on Rocky Horror
Picture Show.
Picture Show.
oh, now I got to watch that
Yes.
again. But I, knowing that, it was interesting that I'm listening to this, and my sister was a big sort of theater person, and I listened to a lot of sort of the, sort of musical soundtracks, just sort of in passing, and just sort of the way he approaches his sort of lyrical structures and the way the songs are put together, almost sort of feel like what I would imagine a cross between like Boston and like, just like Broadway musicals. It just sort of the way that the songs are structured and the way it feels, and the way he sort of has, I can't remember all the names, but there were a few songs where he had multiple vocalists going on at the same time, and instead of harmonizing with each other, there's almost sort of a back and forth, well, not almost, there was definitely a back and forth on certain songs, and I think that made it fun in a way that I hadn't really experienced with other albums, because it sort of adds that element of, it almost feeling like a musical, like an opera. The other thing is that I just really, I don't know how it's possible, but this was probably my first time really listening to Meatloaf, and I just really,
Yeah.
just really enjoyed it. I had a great time listening to this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you think of this album and like it's one of the best selling albums of all time. It's like crazy. Like every one of our parents, every single person in our parents' generation has at least heard of Meatloaf, which like, there's a lot of big artists from that era, from like the 70s, 60s, or 70s and 80s, but Meatloaf kind of transcends. It's funny that like Bat Out of Hell like wasn't even really one of the big songs off this album. Like it, and you think about that, I feel like Bat Out of Hell is pretty well known. But like Paradise by the Dashboard Light has like twice as many streams on Spotify. It's crazy.
Interesting.
Uh,
I think
yeah.
the ballads were really big back then.
Yeah.
And it's funny how like a lot of these kind of glam theatrical acts I like some have aged. I don't know if they've aged better, but like they're in the public eye a lot more, like Queen or like Bowie, Elton John. But like Bat Out of Hell, one of the biggest selling albums of all time. I feel like people don't talk about it as much as those others.
And it's wild because it's his first album, but he's got such lush instrumentation and like incredible production. Like I'm sure it's a bunch of people that he knew from Broadway. It was like, hey, let's adapt like a musical or something and make a rock album out of it. But like the I think Lauren mentioned the vocals like harmonizing and complimenting him on especially Bad Out of Hell, and just how many incredible rock like instruments there are just complementing his voice throughout the entire album. It's hard to believe that this is somebody's debut.
It sounds incredibly mature for a first album.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
In fact, I didn't even realize it was his first album.
So this album was produced by Todd Rundgren.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
sense.
okay.
That makes a lot more sense. Oh,
He's pretty big at the
okay.
time.
There
I was
we
like,
go.
how did they get all these talented players?
He had a good team. He's played like with other. I'm just looking at his Wikipedia right now. But he's like played with. He was in part of Ted Nugent's band for a while.
Oh, interesting.
Let's see. A tour with the National Lampoon Roadshow.
So this was his solo debut, but he'd been in the music scene for a while previously.
Yeah, let me see how old he was.
Okay. So he made a bunch of friends on the way and was able to get the sort of production that he had on this album. Because yeah, again, it just sounds very mature for first album.
Jim Steinman he worked with too. So yeah.
Very cool.
Sounds like just a success story of a really talented guy who met a whole lot of really other talented people and put something really great together.
I'm sure he'd be an interesting guy to get a beer with.
Yeah.
Or several.
in a van down by the river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
What's the rating?
Wow. That's a good question. It's not like I feel like it doesn't really like rewrite the map of like music, but at the same time, it's just an awesome album and it's so much fun to listen to. It's fun to go back and over. I'm gonna give it an 8.2.